Hey, it's Matt, your average gamer, and for this one we're doing a Necromancer build. This is going to be a really fun and enjoyable setup. This focuses on death sorceries. This is a really entertaining build. It's something that it's a little bit different for me because we're going to be using summons and stuff too. Let's get into the details on this one. So while Rykard's Rancor is really fun to use, it's actually not a death sorcery or boosted by death sorcery stuff. However, we will be using explosive Ghostflame, Ancient Death Rancor, and a couple other really cool ones, along with summons and a couple weapons that make good use of a Faith Intelligence build. We're currently on Journey 12, by the way, picking up where my mage last left off. We're going to be taking on some early game bosses and going over the details on where to grab everything as well. This is a setup that's really fun and can work for the majority of the game. It mixes up a whole bunch of different spells, weapons, everything, including using the Skeletal Militiamen. You see them there, and it was really entertaining, again, being able to use summons. I don't use summons in a lot of my videos. I know I mentioned that already, but being able to throw them in here and then do the death sorceries, just kind of hang back and do them. The Necromancer type build is really cool. First, where do you get the Prince of Death staff? It is in Deep Root Depths. You're going to see it on the map there. That's the grace that essentially you're going to go from. There is a closer one as you get towards the top there, but you're probably going to end up coming from that one grace that I showed there. And next up, where do you get the Skeletal Militiamen? They are literally the perfect summons for us because not only are they already dead, but they can revive themselves and be, I guess, even more dead, if that makes any sense whatsoever. But even so, it's really enjoyable using these guys, and you get them in Limgrave. They're actually one of the best early game summons that you can get in the game. You get them here in Limgrave by this not-so-tough boss. He's really easy to take down, even at early levels. I decided to opt to use Death Ritual Spear because it's a part of our build in general. Speaking of which, the Ash of War, the unique Ash of War on Death Ritual Spear, scales entirely just like Death's Poker, even though it has a D in intelligence with your intelligence stat. So the Ash of War itself is fantastic to use if you have a decent intelligence stat, and you can boost it by Terra Magika as well, doing a substantial amount of damage, especially to larger targets. We're going to show that as we go here. And next up, where do you get Ancient Death Rancor? And you get them by defeating this death bird here in Lyurny of the Lakes. I'm going to show on the map shortly where it is. As you can see, I went with Death Ritual Spear again because it's quite powerful, especially given the fact that the Ash of War scales with our intelligence stats, so it's something to consider to use. This is one of the many weapons we're going to be using for this setup. We're going to use the Sword of Night and Flame and such too. I'm going to go over the weapons, spells, everything you need to know in a little bit, but here it is in Lyurny of the Lakes on the map on the right side of the academy. And next up is where do you get Tibia summons. I'm just going to show this on the map here. You get that in Windham Ruins, the area around there. There's a boss that will drop that for you, and then Explosive Ghostflame, which is something that's really powerful. It can do a lot of damage, a lot of frost damage in general. It does take a little bit to get off. We'll go over that. That you get in Consecrated Snowfield, the Apostle Derelict up there in the top left-hand corner. And here we go with the build. And Death Ritual Spear is where I was going to start off from. I know it was in the intro and then I used it after that a little bit. It is really fun to use, but that's just going to be one of the many weapons. We're going to show off the other ones as we go here and the different spells and everything that you can cast while boosting death sorceries. Next up on Agil here, we used the Skeletal Militiamen again, and then we ended up using Ancient Death Rancor in a combination of a couple different things. That is boosted by death sorceries, by the way, and it is a substantially damaging spell when they all land. And then we mixed in Death Ritual Spear as our weapon because of the fact that he's a huge target and it does damage, massive damage to big targets. He's going to go down fairly fast with this combination. By the way, the Jellyfish shield is a little bit bugged, or I don't know if it's intended or not, but you can activate it and then throw it on your back and then use whatever Ash of War you're using currently on the current patch 1.09. They may change that eventually, but it is another boost that you can throw in there with Terra Magika as well. It's going to be really entertaining as we go here. Definitely be sure to follow this because there's going to be a whole bunch more as far as spells that we're going to add and explain too. There's a lot to this build in terms of spells and weapons that you can use, and to make the best use, or one of the best uses, of a Faith and Intelligence build, because Faith and Intelligence has been a little bit lacking in Elden Ring, but you can turn it into something great with a little bit of thought and maybe some help from some summons and whatnot too. But it is fun. Faith and Intelligence can be really powerful. I wanted to throw this clip in real quick just to show this before we move on with everything else that's involved in this build. For larger targets, I know I showed it once, but I wanted to show it even better here. This can do a substantial, actually massive amounts of damage as far as Death Ritual Spear itself, and it can also do posture damage as well, so we end up getting a posture break here. It is fantastic for large targets. So if you're a mage and if you're somebody, maybe you're using Death's Poker or you're using that Ash of War right now, which is incredibly powerful, you can then throw in Death's Ritual Spear for some of your larger targets. I mean, obviously they're both great in their own way, but if you want to mix that in too, they do have similar scaling. Now let's get into this full build and make the best use of a Faith Intelligence build. Let's do this. So first we end up throwing in our Skeletal Militiamen because obviously they're a lot of fun to use, and then we ended up using the Shackle, and now we're rocking the Sword of Night and Flame. I did this on a level 200 character, by the way. You can do it on 150, but it's a little bit tighter. This is kind of a late game build. As far as the build itself goes though, you can make a lot of use out of the Sword of Night and Flame. If you're not going to go as high intelligence, by the way, and you want to save some levels, as far as the Prince of Death's staff, it's scaling, you're going to want to have at least 45 faith and at least 45 intelligence to make the best out of the staff itself. It has its first real initial major cap at 45 and 45, long story short, and we also wanted to throw in the moon here because the moon is kind of a dark sorcery after all anyway. You can use Ronnie's moon as well too if you have high enough intelligence, and then we're going to throw in a whole bunch of different mix of things on Godric here. Now what we have for Godric is Ancient Death Rancor, and then we have Rykard's Rancor as well. They combination well together. The only issue that I found with this here, and I ended up getting a hit as a result, is it's almost a little bit to look at its screen sometimes. I actually lost positioning on him for a little bit here because it was a little bit hard to see with all the casting, and he ends up beating me up here as a result. There's a lot on screen, however it does amount to a good amount of damage. And again, you can boost it with Terra Magika if you're able to stay on the spot for even more. And if your summons are doing their job, it's even easier just to cast and to get a lot of damage out of these types of spells. And my summons kind of didn't make it too far in this one. They're actually usually pretty good if they get back up and whatnot, but they didn't do too well here as far as Godric goes. But it's alright, we can take him on. He's just Godric after all, even if we do for some reason get beat up a little bit this time. I wasn't really used to the Death Sorcery stuff. I was trying to mix it up and mix everything in here. But again, Death Ritual Spear, the Sword, Night, and Flame obviously could have taken him down quick. Ancient Death Rancor, Explosive Ghostflame, Rykard's Rancor, not a Death Sorcery, but it goes with everything else. They're all fun to utilize together. If you're not on the Discord, definitely be sure to join that, by the way. I wanted to throw that in there too because that Discord's been growing like crazy. And if you're not subbed, now's the time to sub to this channel. We're going to be doing constant Elden Ring content. Why would you want to miss out at this point? Definitely hit that sub button, and we're just going to continue to do Elden Ring content all the way up until DLC to keep it interesting. Through DLC, it's going to be an absolute blast, so definitely hit that subscribe button too. Now on to mobs. For mobs, by the way, I really like the Sword of Night and Flame. It's something simple where you can stand back and do a lot of damage. If there's a group of them, you can actually use the fire part of it, and then if you're a little bit further away, you can use the beam part of it and absolutely destroy the majority of regular enemies in the game. Yeah, the Sword of Night and Flame is an incredibly reliable faith and intelligence weapon. I know some people will go with the base faith stats and then they'll go for the beam because obviously the beam for the most part is the better part of the weapon. But if you're able to get both, the fire part has its uses too. A lot of enemies are weak to or have 0 fire resistance. It's also good for grouping against mobs as well. And it's something that can add to the damage types, giving you magic and fire damage too. It adds to a good combination. Sword of Night and Flame is very good. As far as NPC invader type enemies go, you can absolutely destroy them with the Sword of Night and Flame. It'll actually knock them down and it does massive damage. You can take care of them very quickly with the beam. I prefer the beam part. The fire is a little bit slow, but again, it does do substantial damage with faith investment. They're both quite good. I really enjoy the Sword of Night and Flame. Let's get into equipment. For equipment, we have the Prince of Death's Staff. We have the Sword of Night and Flame. We have Death Ritual Spear. Any seal will do. We have the Jellyfish Shield. The Spellblade set will boost our Ashes of War on the beam itself, and then Death Ritual Spear, Shard of Alexander, Graven Mask Talisman, Ritual Swords Talisman, Magic Scorpion Charm. We have the Magic tier, and then we got those Skeletal Militiamen too as our preferred summons for the Necromancer type build. Now, although 45 and 45 is the ideal mark for a faith and intelligence build, if you want to flip it the other way because the faith part can be a little bit lacking just to get the minimum requirements on some stuff, you can go with like 30 or 35 faith and then go higher intelligence around 60, and I'm sure you can make it work around 150. It is a tight build in the 150 range because you're focusing on 2 things, but it is doable. I did this as a late game 200 build though, currently on Journey 12. Now I'm going to show off the buffs, the different spells we're using and everything, and go over basically everything that we'd like to use in combination for this build and how to buff this. It's very simple as far as the buffs go. You can use Golden Vow and Howl Shabriri for any weapon arts. They're not working for spells currently though. So we're going to use Terra Magika, and we're going to end up using Golden Vow more for the defense part. Make sure you drink your tier. We're going to use the Jellyfish Shield as well. And then we have stuff like Ancient Death Rancor, Rykard's Rancor, explosive Ghostflame, whole bunch of different fun stuff you could do. Sword of Night and Flame, Death Ritual Spear, it all adds up to a really enjoyable Necromancer build that can be quite powerful too. Yeah, this is something that you're flat out gonna enjoy if you're a mage, if you want to mix it up and do something different as far as death sorceries go. You can make good use out of them and they can be really powerful, so keep that in mind. Faith and Intelligence can absolutely be a powerful build. Oh, by the way, a lot of people were looking for mage and magic stuff, so I did a whole bunch of, well, not a whole bunch, but several different ones this week to kind of get up to date on. I know it had been a minute. Plus, we did focus on all faith last week, and that was really, really interesting too, being able to just focus solely on faith. And for this weekend, we have that Ash of War tier list coming up too, so that's going to be something that should be really informative. If you're not on the Discord, definitely be sure to join. And if you're not subbed and you love overpowered PvE builds, be sure to check out all the awesome builds that are on my channel. There's like an entire library there now. Thanks for watching, and as always, I will catch you guys there.